Hi, everyone. May peace be on you all, and welcome to another episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And I am back with another gift to the gab and with a fellow podcaster, Dr. Rose Aslan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Shaila. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you for being my guest. And you are a certified transformational life coach, an educator, academic, and a breathwork facilitator
Breath
or
work.
breathwork.
Yeah,
I
breath
don't
work.
know.
It's okay. We breathe and we do breath work.
Breathwork. Okay. And what, I mean, you're a transformational life coach and a breathwork facilitator. First, tell me about that. I mean, I've heard of life coaches, but again, being as I am, I'm not sure what any of this means.
Sure. Let me give you some translation to regular people speak. Well, first of all, until like a year ago, I was actually a professor, associate
Mm,
professor of Islam and religion. So I had a
mm,
very reputable job, that lots of social capital, and I quit it all. Um,
wow.
and a couple years ago, while I was still employed, but I was still trying to figure things out on my sabbatical year, I just decided to try another calling. And my other calling
Mm,
was life coaching. Life
mm,
coaching is, I'd say my work is still really connected to what I do. I've always been invested in religion, spirituality, studying it, teaching it, writing about it, thinking about it, talking about it. That's my thing. And so it just turned out in doing it within the academy wasn't the best fit, even though I just spent more than 20 years invested in that space.
mm,
I moved over and now I do my thing with religion, spirituality in the context of life coaching, really. So, life coaching
mm,
means I work with primarily, but not limited to, women and mainly Muslim women, helping them to figure out what they want to do with their life, how they can, if they feel stuck, if they're stuck in the grind, if they feel just stuck in their lives, I help them get unstuck. I help them really figure out who they are, what they want, um, who are they beyond all the people pleasing, beyond what everyone wants from them, what they actually want from
right.
themselves, and what Allah wants from them versus just other people. So that's life coaching. And I get to do so many different things with different people depending on their needs. It's very different. Sometimes I help graduate students get through their dissertation if they don't have a good advisor. And sometimes I help women
Mm,
change careers or move countries. It really depends
right.
on their needs. And I also lead group programs as well. And then breath work is something that I recently got certified. I was in a 400-hour training program, and basically, why I got so invested in it is because I've been on this healing path for a number of
Mm,
years. 6 years intentionally, really walking
mm,
this path. And that started when I was preparing to leave my now ex-husband, and I felt incredibly broken. And I tried a
mm.
lot of different healing modalities. I'm talking like everything. I was in Los Angeles, right? The land of everything like new agey spiritual. And I just
Right.
tried everything because I was just like, felt so terrible. And I
Mm,
needed to be fixed. That's what I
mm,
felt. And so I tried all kinds of things along the way. In the process, I kept on going back to the breath. The breath,
mm,
just learning how to breathe deeply with certain kinds of methods and techniques, I found to be very practical. Because,
mm.
first of all, a lot of these fancy modalities, you need a lot of investment, you need special supplies, you need a lot of
Right.
money. Once you learn
Mm,
how to do breath work, you need nothing. You just need a
mm,
body. Everyone
right.
breathes every moment of the day because if we didn't, we'd be dead. And so I
Mm,
just love how simple it is to learn breath work, but
mm,
how much most people aren't aware of their breath on a regular basis, on a
right.
moment to moment basis. So, what I
Right.
do is I can sit down with someone, I can diagnose their breathing
Mm,
patterns. Very quickly, I can notice if they have incorrect, as we call it, breathing patterns that lead to inefficient use of their bodily
mm,
functions and their physiology, which could mean that they're really fatigued, they're not sleeping well, they have a lot of
mm,
anxiety. Sometimes it's a really quick fix. They just need to correct some way that they're breathing. Right? Sometimes they're
mm.
breathing, and a lot of people nowadays are breathing up here. Right? So if
Right.
you're like breathing, you notice like your chest is heaving. You don't want to breathe like
Right.
that.
Right.
Actually, you probably heard of belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. So it's teaching people
Right.
to breathe lower. So I'm finding that breath work is so practical. What I like about it
Mm,
as an academic who's trained to to rely on peer-reviewed research. There's a ton of peer-reviewed research about the efficacy of breath work. So
Mm.
I practice analytical woo. I love woo, but I like when it's backed up, you know? So
Right,
breath
right.
work is super backed up. So
Right.
it's not just like you can't like charging crystals. I've never seen evidence that it works. So I don't charge crystals. I have crystals, but I don't charge them. I know a lot of people who
Oh my
charge
god,
them.
that seems like you're charging money to the crystal. I'm sorry, but I'm like, I'm confused. What does this mean? I
Like
don't know.
I don't exactly know. Like I just know that there's gatherings where people bring
Right, right,
crystals
right,
and then they like all charge them. I don't know exactly how it works because I
right,
just
right.
haven't
And It's
participated in
it's in
that.
the spiritual,
Yeah, yeah. New age
spiritual
world.
practices. Again, I've heard of it. It does sound
It
weird.
sounds funny, right? Where you charge yourself with crystals or something, you
Right,
know?
right, right,
Like I
right,
have not seen peer-reviewed research backing that up.
right.
But breath work is amazing. My teacher, she is a medical doctor who then became a
Mm,
breathwork teacher. So she actually knows physiology, anatomy really well, and so
right.
it was such an honor to learn with her, because
Mm,
she's also giving us peer reviewed research and evidence as we're learning the practices with her, and so
mm,
it's been a really powerful tool that I use within my coaching,
right.
within my work with people, as well
Mm.
as everywhere. Everyone in my life knows that I'm going to ask them about their breath, you know, so they're like, before I even ask them to say, "Oh yeah, I've been breathing. Like my breathing's a little off," or "Yeah, I've been taking some deep breathing." My friends love
Oh,
to
wow.
reassure me that, like, I'm like, "How are you?" Like, "Don't worry, I've been taking some deep breaths lately." You know?
No, but it's fantastic what you
Yeah.
do now. It's helping people in so many different ways, like in their overall life sphere, and as well, like your breath work
Hmm.
does, help internal balance
Yeah.
for a lot of people. But that's not why I have you here,
Yeah.
even though that's very fascinating. Not
It's kind of
exactly why I have
connected.
you
Yeah.
here. Yes. So as you mentioned that you're an academic, and like in your bio you had said that you received your PhD in Islamic studies from the University of North Carolina, and you have a master's in Arab and Islamic civilizations in the American University in Cairo.
Hmm.
So why,
Why?
Rose? Why, Dr. Rose? I mean, y'all got all the certifications of like being a really fancy schmancy
I
teacher,
was
and
just Nancy.
yeah, you've got all the fancy schmancy accreditation. So, how and why is the switch? Especially, it's relevant in discussion, especially when in the atmosphere, the global atmosphere that is right now,
Hmm.
with the terrible atrocities that are occurring in Palestine. I think, and you had put it so aptly that you were once a professional Muslim. And I
Hmm.
had to sit there and think for a second. I'm like, yes, I'm an unprofessional Muslim, but I mean, I don't think that's what you meant when you said that you were a professional Muslim. So if I had to start somewhere,
Yeah.
I want you to help us sort of understand, what does it mean to be a professional Muslim in your prior career
Yeah.
as an academic?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And I think as I describe it, I think Muslim listeners are going to start to recognize, and they'll realize
Right.
they know people who are professional Muslims. So, professional Muslim, I'd say, is an identity, a function of some
Mm,
Muslims in the community within the US and probably in Canada and other Western countries where Muslims are minority. And I'd say it started after 9/11. Now, I was
mm,
still in college when 9/11 happened, so I didn't automatically become a professional Muslim when 9/11 happened. Um,
mm,
but basically, as a result of 9/11, there were very few people in the media in Hollywood at that time uh, who were up high and Muslim. Right
mm.
nowadays, it's completely different. There's Muslims at
Right.
all places in politics and the media and
Mm,
culture. It's amazing nowadays in
right.
2023 compared to back in 2001. But because
Right.
Muslims didn't have a big sphere of influence, even among academics, there was a very
Mm.
small group of professors of Islam and even smaller of Muslim professors of Islam.
Right.
Nowadays, wow, there's so many professors of Islam who are
Mhm.
Muslim, first of all, when back
Right.
then, it's a small handful. Um,
Right.
and so, what happened as a result of 9/11 is that we needed spokespeople for the Muslim
Mm.
American community, and people stepped up. Someone I interviewed recently on my podcast, Rahma with Rose, for example, was Idina Lekovich, who she
Mm.
used to work for MPAC Muslim Public Affairs Committee in Los Angeles, and she started working for them. guess it was very soon after 9/11, and she would basically be the face of Muslims in California,
Mm.
condemning every attack happening, kind of representing the Muslim voice for
Right.
about 2 decades, right?
Mm.
So we have people who were in the media, people who worked, for MPAC, for
Mm.
CARE, for ISNA, for all kinds of other organizations, as well as people. You can think of someone like Wajahat Ali, for example, who I
Mm.
don't know how you classify him. He's a professional Muslim, really. I don't know
Mm.
where he works right now. But we can think of people who, when you turn on the TV and you expect to see a Muslim talking head, that will be one of the professional Muslims. And so many of these
Yeah.
people, we need them, right?
Right.
They are the ones who usually were born and raised in the US and
Mm.
presented a certain perspective to the American
Mm.
audience. They're trying to show that Muslims are regular people who are American
Right.
just like them. We all know the script, right? That post nine
Right.
11, that's why your podcast is called I'm a Muslim, That's Okay, right? Like that's
Yeah.
literally like the script of every Muslim post 9/11. We get those questions from non Muslims and then we answer them, right? So we all have the
Right.
script, except professional Muslims had to do it in a really public way,
Right.
essentially. So that's what a
Mm.
public Muslim is. And for me, I decided early on in my career to study Islam, primarily just because I love studying religion, spirituality, and I love the Arabic language. So I
Right.
spent a long time in Egypt studying in traditional as well as in a secular university context. And then I just realized I wanted to teach about the religion I'm studying. That's my
Right.
religion, is my chosen religion. I wasn't born and raised Muslim, but I felt called to teach it, especially to my people, the Americans,
Mm.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I felt that having grown up as a young person in post 9/11. Well, first I was in Canada for undergraduate, even though I'm
Mm.
American. Then I went to Egypt, but then I went back to the U.S. and watching post 9/11 America and
Mm.
its attack on Muslims was really difficult. And I just felt it was like
Mm.
my calling at that point in time to do my best in the university context and to get my degree so then I could teach about Islam and battle these misperceptions and fight Islamophobia in the classroom and in my various forms of interfaith activism. So that's kind of one of the biggest motivators for me getting all those fancy schmancy degrees.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's great to have the fancy schmancy
Yeah.
degrees, but it's a huge responsibility, Dr. Rose, is that, yeah, you've gotten your certifications from these really like great academic universities and you're teaching Islamic civilization and everything that comes with it. But it's not the same as just simply teaching. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like a physics
Mm-hmm.
professor is going to be questioned about his morality at any
Mm-hmm.
given point because somebody doesn't agree with string theory or something of
Mm-hmm.
that sort. Um, so, I mean, I think that's what people like, especially in your position, like walk us through it, okay? Because you're not doing it anymore, and that speaks to the fact that you had like this huge academic career, which you mentioned that you just left
Mm-hmm.
behind because being a professional Muslim is ridiculously hard.
Mm-hmm.
Please walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I started when I was in my PhD program in North Carolina, and I think it started because, like, for example, I remember I started Joma prayer, and we had Joma prayers
Mm.
at the hospital, which was really the university hospital was very far away. So I found a Quaker friend's house, really much
Mm.
closer to campus. I was like, and they were very friendly. They kept going out of their way
Mm.
to be friendly to Muslims. So I asked them, "Can we hold Joma prayers there?" And they let us for free, right? And
Oh.
it was so beautiful. And
Hmm.
from that place, I started to do more interfaith work. And I also was always organizing with the Muslims, and I organized
Right.
Jummah khutbas and things like that. And I was like, I think if I remember, I was a graduate advisor to the MSA, and I would
Mm.
consult with them and kind of mentor some of the younger undergraduate MSA students. So I was doing the mentoring of the young Muslims. And then at the same time, I started interfaith work. And there was a very small Muslim population in Chapel Hill where I was living at
Mm.
the time, but and there was an Islamic society, but it was a little
Mm.
bit exclusive and wasn't women friendly, so I wasn't a big
Mm.
part of it, and they didn't want to get involved in interfaith, so I ended up
Mm.
becoming like the Chapel Hill Muslim. I think that's how it started. I was a grad student, but because I felt my calling was to do this, so there'd be Jews, Christians,
Right.
Buddhists, and I was the Muslim they would call up. Usually, there was
Right.
other than that, there was older Muslims, but I was the only one in
Right.
my
Right.
generation who was willing to show up, and I showed up a lot. Luckily it was a small
Right.
town; it was easy to get around, and I loved it. It was so powerful to have these gatherings, especially in the South where there was attacks on Muslims. Islamophobia was a real
It's North
threat.
Carolina,
It was
Dr.
North
Rose. I
Carolina.
mean,
I mean, I left
yeah.
the year before, the killing of the three winners.
Mm,
So it was tense even before
right.
they were killed. So it was North Carolina exactly. I mean,
Mm.
every time you're walking alone and there's like a pickup truck slowly moving behind me, I'd get very scared.
Oh, yeah.
Or traveling around the South,
Mm.
we just quickly move through some places and not stop.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so that's where my professional Muslim career started. And then
Mm.
I moved across the country where I got my first teaching job at at California Lutheran University. I was assistant professor of global Islam, as they called it. And I was the Muslim on campus. I
Mm.
was at a Christian, liberal mainline Protestant Christian university. They hired me not only because they wanted a scholar of Islam, but I think they liked that I was Muslim and a visible, outspoken Muslim, and they
Right.
liked that fact. That
Mm.
they're very liberal and they wanted representation. They knew there was some issues and they wanted to challenge it. They had no classes on Islam.
Right.
They
Right.
had were there any? I think I was the first Muslim faculty member, at least the first outspoken one. Definitely the
Mm.
first hijabi on campus. So it
Right.
was a big burden of representation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
For
And at that
sure.
time, I was fine with that burden of representation, of being the Muslim. So anytime there's anything going on, who do they call? There's something about Islam. Of
Dr.
course,
Rose.
they call Dr. Rose. Like it was cool at times. Like they had Thursday chapel service, for example, and I gave a
Mm.
couple sermons, for example. They also invited my Sikh colleagues to give
Mm.
sermons, so they're very inclusive.
Right. Right.
Sometimes I'd have to do very awkward interfaith activities where they weren't as sensitive they thought they were being, and I would
Mm.
support people with religious sensitivity training, and I just did everything,
Right.
and when you're on the tenure track, you do anything and everything because you're also hoping to get tenure, and that's a 6-year
Right.
process. So you're like, yes, yes,
Right.
yes,
Right.
right? But I enjoyed it. I also got invitations in Los Angeles. I joined synagogues for various activities. I gave sermons at a couple of churches, Universalist,
Mm.
Unitarian Church, and gave talks and workshops at various community events. And also, I was involved in interfaith. I remember just giving, like, here, we need some random Muslim to give a prayer at some place. I was like,
Oh,
okay, I'll do
wow.
it, and going
Right.
into organizing marches. And at the local mosque in my neighborhood, I was what was I think I was on the interfaith committee or something, and I helped them organize
Mm.
interfaith iftars and events. They had some
Mm.
really good events when I was there with some of my friends. um so I was doing everything. I was
Right.
involved with the Women's Mosque of America, which obviously is not interfaith, but they appreciate having me as an academic scholar of Islam
Mm.
as well. I think so I did a lot of stuff. And I don't even know how I did it because I started my job when my son was 8 months old. So I'm like, when I
Mm.
start listing
Wow.
these things, I'm like, how did I do all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Plus, I was in an abusive marriage and I left that.
Mm.
So it all somehow happened. Along the way,
Mm-hmm.
I also joined and got trained with American Muslim Civic Leadership Institute, which I'm perhaps you're familiar with, amicably, which was amazing because it's an
Mm.
organization based out of University of Southern California that basically
Mm.
helps connect professional Muslims in a way, Muslim
Right.
grassroots leaders around the U.S. It
Right.
helps them um, gain how would they put it, to become more present and powerful leaders, to gain
Right.
more confidence and things like that. And it
Right.
was
Right.
very powerful to be part of that
Mm.
organization. I'm still in touch with people from that organization. So I did a lot during those years, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But again, Dr. Rose, um, why stop?
yeah.
You're
Why
doing a
stop?
bang up job.
I was
I
doing
mean,
great.
you're representing us and you're
Yeah,
being in all of these
I
places.
was
You're
doing
the
my work.
important Muslim in the room. Why quit
It was
this?
very good for the ego, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, man.
It was great. I
Everybody wants
love
Dr.
like
Rose.
I love I am Dr. Rose. It was great. Like all that work, and finally I could use the title. The only place I get to use title now is like on videos like this.
No,
So why did I?
but you're still the Dr. Rose. It's just that You're not the previous Dr.
Yes,
Rose
yes,
who's on the in the spotlight. But
yes,
why?
yes. Why? So you remember the days of the primary elections for the Republican candidate when Trump was one of the candidates in 2000. Oh my God, what year was that? I don't remember. Like
Oh my god.
everything's
That
blended.
was like 2000 like
15, yeah.
2015-ish.
That
Yeah.
those years, I'm sure all
Yeah.
Muslims remember it well. Like when we followed like the absurdity that was the Republican
Mhm.
candidates and what they were debating about Islam and Muslims, like it was like insane.
Oh
And then
yeah.
teaching this in the classroom, and I also one of my favorite topic to teach is media analysis. Media
Mhm.
bias analysis. So before,
Right.
the crazy thing about teaching Islam in the United States is, first of all, what you're teaching is the main thesis. And my dear advisor for my PhD, Dr. Carl Ernst, he has a book called, oh my God, Following Muhammad. I think it is. I should know, right? I taught this book for many years. Oh my God, I hope that that's the name of the book. Anyway, Carl
That's
Ernst's
okay.
big book on
You can
Islam.
tell me later and we'll put that in the
Yes,
show
big book
notes.
on Islam. It's a great book. His
Mm.
thesis, because he wrote this, after 9/11, is that he wants American students to realize that Muslims are human too, because
Mhm.
Americans did not realize that we are also human. And so when you teach Islam to American college
Right.
students, you're literally trying to humanize Muslims to them and show,
Right.
look at Muslims also like fashion. We also like watching movies. We also like going to eat ice cream.
Yeah.
Like it's so sad. But I think all
Right, right.
Muslims are like, yep, yep. Right. And so
Mhm.
that's, of course, like, we go a little bit deeper than that. But so in the first part of all the classes I taught was media bias analysis and how the media is really
Mm.
biased and how it depicts Islam. And we can't say Islam until we realize how the media has bombarding us our whole lives in the
Right.
US against Muslims and dehumanizing Muslims and Orientalism
Right.
and imperialism and all that. That's like the premise of all my classes. So then we get to 2015 and those primaries. I'm like, oh my God. And I had to teach through those years. And then I taught through 4 years of Trump. And oh my
Mhm.
God, like teaching Islam in a Christian university to often majority white Christian classrooms was not easy. I can tell you that. If I was lucky, I had like one or two Muslim students. Quite few students were sympathetic and engaging, but I had a lot of students I was like fighting against. I just felt like it was like a fight.
Right.
And I put my heart and soul into it. And I know that I put too much of my heart and soul into it, really, and that's why
Mm.
eventually I got burnt out. But teaching during those years of Trump just like did something to me. Um,
Right.
it's really hard to
I think
explain.
it did something to all of us.
Yes, I mean not just teaching, but living under.
Not just teaching, but
Yes, living.
in general.
Exactly, exactly. But teaching it because I was also going through a lot of personal existential crises,
Right, right, right.
having been with my husband and then leaving him, and um, I had been with him for a long time. I had been going through
Mhm.
some challenges with religion and spirituality and grappling with the patriarchy, grappling with
Mm.
spiritual and religious abuse in the context of my marriage, and being in
Right, right.
some Sufi communities that also included that. So when you come to this intersection of experiencing religion, spiritual abuse in a marriage, sometimes in other Muslim communities, and then that happening, and then having to teach all this, it just
Mm.
started to feel wrong. I can't really put
Right.
it. It just like I was like, can't I just be a botany teacher? Can I just change like my topics and like teach about plants? I don't know. I just made that up, but like it felt too hard to teach something that is so personal to me, that is me, that my own identity, that I couldn't unravel where my personal beliefs and identity kind of ended and where my professional life started. And I
Mm.
found after a while those getting really unhealthy, essentially. Um, and so there's being the classroom saying, and Muslims believe this, and they say this. And I'm like, I don't believe that anymore. I'm struggling with that. Like, I don't want to teach Islamic law
Mm.
anymore because that sucks. I'm just like, I don't want to have to answer those questions because I just want to tell my students that's a bunch of BS or whatever. And like, I'm just tired of being an apologist, really. And
Mm.
also the burden of representation. I was just tired of
Right.
representing all Muslims to people,
Right.
and I was like, I just want to be me. I don't actually want to have to represent all these people. And I don't represent them and I can't, but there's too many people and I can only represent me. But I couldn't just say that. I had to,
Right. Right.
despite I had to represent Islam to students, not even wanting to.
And in our previous discussion, you had said that, I mean, obviously what you were going through was very real, but it was not unique to you.
Hmm.
That there are many Muslim
Hmm.
academics who go through this burnout, and like you've talked to them, did they have similar experience as you? And only speaking in the academic context,
Yeah.
not the personal life
Yeah.
context. But one of the reasons that go from professional Muslim being the face of all Muslims to be like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, just to clarify, when I talk about professional Muslims, I speak about academics, but people in any
Right,
realm.
right, right,
A lot of the people I've been in touch with aren't necessarily academics.
right, right,
Among
right.
Islamic studies professors who are Muslim, not many have left. I know a couple who are kind of planning to leave,
Mm,
but I don't know many. I was like the first one who made a splash and
mm,
like very vocally like quit. You know, I made a big,
right, right.
put a big message on Facebook, and I even wrote a letter last year, I think, to the big Islamic studies listserv in the U.S. And I was like, goodbye. You know,
Right.
that was scary to write to a listserv of like all the scholars of Islam in the U.S. But it's not just academics; it's people in any realm. And
Oh,
yes,
yes,
a
yes.
lot of people are tired and are
Mm,
overwhelmed. And what's really interesting is that my journey ended me up, or I ended up in Istanbul, where I've been living
mm,
for nearly 3 years now.
mm,
One of the reasons is because you don't have the burden of representation here anymore. You're just another
mm.
person in the street, you know, and you don't have to
Right,
defend
right.
Islam anymore. But yeah, that's the issue, is a lot of Muslims find themselves burnt out who are professional Muslims because they don't want to represent an entire group of people anymore. They just want to be themselves. This is what I found. And they want to be a nuanced person with all kinds of interests and hobbies, but they're boxed into this pigeonhole and they can't get out of it unless they completely quit. Plus, it's also very difficult. I've not worked in a nonprofit or anything, but I know that working in Muslim nonprofits is especially hard. They're often underpaid, overworked, sometimes pushed to do more things fi sabilillah, you know, in the
Mm,
path of Allah, for, charity purposes, and they just can't keep up with the demands on them as well. And this
right.
is aside from regular burnout of, being, for example, a parent and working a lot and just having
Right.
normal burnout. But it's such an added representation to be a Muslim in the limelight in the United States,
Mm.
trying to defend Muslims against countless um, countless accusations that never seem to end.
Right, right. And I think that's what's integral about this entire like conversation again, especially in the context of how everything is unfolding now. There's a lot of Muslims out there that are then sitting here either arguing for defense of a people that are obviously being eradicated in Palestine, and they have to fight accusations or of being
Mm-hmm.
anti-Semitic. It's the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
because I can only imagine, like, if you were still doing what you did, how much of a burden it would have been on you to have to answer all of these questions. Like, do you bring out a statement for the Muslim people in Palestine, or you do, or you don't?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very difficult situation to be under.
Mm-hmm.
If you're still working for the Christian university, how would have gone for you? Like,
Yeah.
if you did, then would have there have been a backlash to all of this? I
Yeah.
just yesterday, I was like, I'd seen like a sort of a news post in that Starbucks
Mm.
is suing its own union because they had sent out a message
Mm.
in support of Palestine. So it, like, especially in times like these, everybody gets fired up.
Mm-hmm.
And you you and other professional Muslims are in the first line of target. Okay, she's well known. She's the face of all Muslims. They go after the professional Muslims first,
Mm-hmm.
but it also trickles down
Mm-hmm.
to every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
As you had said, the reason why you moved to Turkey is because now you don't have to answer those questions, but there's a lot of Muslims, even on the street,
Mm-hmm.
that have to answer. And as we saw of that poor 6-year-old boy who was stabbed by his landlord, they have to pay for it as
Yeah.
well. So, I mean, I think most people, especially when they're not Muslims, don't realize the amount of heavy impact
Mm-hmm.
that is, a lot of my friends, after, all of this happened in Palestine, they feel like, and the stabbing in
Mhm.
Chicago, they felt like, it was 9/12.
Mhm.
And most people who are not Muslims don't understand the feeling of 9/12. But after 9/11, and none of us sympathize with 9/11, but after 9/11,
Mhm.
on the day after, Muslims were on high alert
Mhm.
because they felt like that they were going to be attacked for just existing
Mhm.
as they are. And I, again, I especially through the Trump years, I don't know how you stood there teaching and, having to be that public figure that had to go through all of this. But I can only imagine that now, even now, it must be difficult for everybody, all those who are professional Muslims, academic or not, to have to face this kind of backlash. If you had like any word of suggestion for those who are, um, professional Muslims, and for those who are questioning professional Muslims, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I have so much admiration and love for the people who still do the work. Like, I quit,
Mm,
I just decided it was
right.
too much for me. And the reason why, there's many reasons why. It wasn't just for
Yeah,
being a professional Muslim, it was also there's some issues in my department and academia. It
right,
wasn't
right.
just about teaching Islam, just to make that clear. It was just part of the reason, right? I quit because I decided I wasn't at capacity. I no longer had the capacities to do that kind of work
Mm,
anymore. And I'm doing it in a different way that's more on my terms now, right? Um, so I quit because now I'm very cognizant of my capacity. And the biggest
right.
piece of advice I have for people is you need to be on alert at all times for burnout, for signs of burnout,
Right.
and try to keep yourself as regulated as possible and to care for yourself and to offer yourself as much compassion as possible because we need you
Mm,
so much. We need you to keep
mm,
doing the work, keep fighting the fight. It's a really
right.
good and honorable fight, using your intellect, using your organizing capabilities, you're using so many different amazing skills you have, your creativity, but what I'm noticing right now, for example, during this genocide happening in Gaza, is that people are burning themselves out really quickly, and everyone I speak to is
Mm,
dysregulated, and they're triggering other people. There's like the shame-based culture on social media of saying if you don't post
right.
exactly this, you should be ashamed of
Right.
yourself, and this isn't helping anyone. So
Mm,
I think first of all, care for yourself. Monitor
right.
yourself incredibly closely. Make sure you have a therapist if you need a life coach. Make sure you have a huge amount of resources around you that also how to resource yourself from within. That
Right.
includes finding different regulation techniques that work for you. Because the only way to survive the long run and to keep on going is to make sure you know what your capacity is and to keep at or below capacity and slowly to expand it, but never to push it because that's when burnout
Mm,
happens. Um,
right.
yeah.
And for those who are coming for the professional Muslims, I think that's one of the things that non-Muslims don't realize. Yeah, y'all got a lot of questions, but how many of those questions are necessary?
Hmm.
So, what advice do you have that has a question? There is a burning curiosity or like a burning misunderstanding. How do they come to a professional Muslim?
So you just mean the random people in the street who are like, "Why are you
The
wearing?"
random people are
Yeah,
online.
yeah,
I mean, on
yeah,
the street,
yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to come up to anybody.
Oh, it always happens.
But
It
yeah.
never happened to you?
Oh wow. No, man. I have the RBF. I'm immune to
I love
that.
it. I love it. I do smile a lot, so but I don't know about you,
Yeah,
but like
I
I always had the issue even around and people like, "Oh, like they just like come up to me in random context, maybe it's a California thing, and just like ask me random questions about Islam because
oh
of yeah,
wow.
like always. And I'm like, of course, I'm always on. I'm ready to like put
Right,
my
right,
professor hat on. So I was always ready for that, and I guess at that
right.
time I enjoyed it.
No,
But
but that's part of the burnout
it
too.
was
Like if you had like
definitely
random people coming up on the street, I'm
yeah.
like, dang man,
Well, here's the
I'm just here for
thing.
coffee.
Like I remember I'd be driving. I'm like, okay, make sure you don't do anything bad. Like I like to drive, a little fast on the highway and stuff. Like, make sure I'm not cutting anyone off, right? Because then they'll
Right,
think
right.
all Muslims do that, right? So it's like you have to be
Oh
so
man.
careful, right? Nowadays, if I want to drive quickly in Turkey, no one cares. I'm
Yeah.
just represent all women here.
Yeah.
um,
No, but yeah, like
yeah. So what do you?
it could be on the street, or but social media is our favorite anonymity
Yes.
platform. You can make a fake profile and then come for somebody.
So I have a
But
policy
that's the
about that nowadays, Shahla, is
mm,
basically I used to try to engage with people in person and really have
mm,
these thoughtful, deep conversations. And with my students, those
right,
are the people I invested with the most because they were there
right,
to
right.
learn. But I also invested with a lot of people online. And first of all,
Mm,
like I don't invest with people online who I don't know, who I don't have a relationship
okay.
with, who have those kind of questions. I'm like,
Hmm.
you can go somewhere else. I'm not here to answer your Wikipedia questions. Like nowadays when people write something that appears just silly, hostile, whatever, I'll say, and either ignore them, block them if it's, really awful, or else just like, thank you for sharing your opinion. And I just don't have the bandwidth to engage with you. I wrote
Hmm.
someone on Facebook the other day, a Muslim shared something that was really anti Semitic. And I said, you really should think twice if you want to share this. This is really not the time or
Right,
place. It was just
right,
awful. It was like,
right, right.
it was terrible. So then she like wanted to say, look at this. She was giving me random quotes that were screenshot with, and I was like, come on, like my undergrads could do better than this. Like you're a grown woman.
Mm,
I didn't even say that. I
right,
was like, I don't have the bandwidth to engage with you, but you should think
right.
twice. So I have a lot. I have what I call very compassionate boundaries now, is that I
Hmm.
will only engage with people um, who really are asking questions that I think that I am a good person to answer, and if I could guide them to
Right,
the right resource. Otherwise, there's
right,
other places online, and there's something called
right,
Google, and Sheikh
right.
Google is a great resource for information too.
I think what you said is key. Like, especially for somebody who's a professional Muslim, not everybody has good faith
Hmm.
questions. Okay, let's just be honest.
Hmm.
Online, very few people have good faith
Yeah.
questions. Okay, and I mean, like, again, I mean, random, but if somebody came up to me and asked me like a deep Islamic civilization question, I ain't the person to answer it. Dr. Rose is the person to answer this question. I don't know Jack half the time. So, I mean, I think that's the thing. People can't have the expectation, just like you can't have a regular person expectation, like just because somebody is Muslim, that they would know every
Hmm.
single thing about Islam. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
We're just regular people, sort of going about our
Hmm.
way and, try to make the best of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I
so
remember
I
I
think
used to
that
get
is,
questions, like I'd give a talk at some like senior citizen home, this then like all they remember is like maybe I mentioned CARE, and they say, but why did you mention an organization that's sponsored by Hamas, like CARE, referring to
oh,
CARE? I'm just
jeez.
like some old white guy. I'm like, I don't even
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say to you, like mister. You're just
Yeah.
like. So that kind
Right,
of stuff is
right.
so tiring.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but again, even though like those things were in the past, I appreciate you that you fought the good fight in those like 4, 5, 6 years that
It was like
Muslims
12
really
years.
needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
Total.
mean
Yeah.
that like Muslims really
Yeah.
needed somebody. And again, it's only understandable that you're one person, that all of this, especially in an atmosphere that can be more often than not very hostile
Mhm.
towards not just Muslims but all
Mhm.
minorities. It is a very difficult and taxing job, and what you do now is also important. So before I let you go, Dr. Rose, please let my audience know where they can find you and what you do, life coaching, breath work, and all.
Yeah, thank you. So, talk about what I do. Yeah, so now am I a professional Muslim now? No, now I'm just a person who supports people. Often they happen to be Muslim, but it's not like
Right,
an Islamic space anymore. So I don't teach about Islam. I create
right,
spaces for Muslims where they can just be human. So it's almost like the very
right,
opposite of what I used to be. Is like allowing Muslims to be together because there's safety and there's understanding of one another, but they don't have to talk about Islam. But often I do
right.
help Muslim women reconnect with their spirituality because there's so much religious trauma and abuse, and I've gone through it myself.
Hmm.
And people struggle with things like prayer, with just believing in various beliefs in Islam, or how to grapple through things that are difficult within Islam, and how to
Right,
approach our beautiful religion in a way that makes sense to who we are as
right,
people
right.
with open minds, right? So I do support people in that way, and I'm still grateful for all of my training and background
Hmm.
and work with that. So I now do one-on-one coaching with people. I do group program. I'm going to start November 1st, something called the Rahma Collective, and it's an
Hmm.
ongoing membership program for Muslim women who want to be in a space for Muslim women. But like I said,
Hmm.
it's not an Islamic space. It's where we focus on community gathering, community connections, to know that we're not alone. It's for learning different embodiment techniques, including breath
Hmm.
work. And it's a space where they can share anything that's on their mind freely without shame, without guilt, which we
Right.
know is so prevalent among Muslims, unfortunately. That's a topic
Hmm.
for another time, guilt and shame. And then also life coaching. And so that's an
Hmm.
ongoing thing. And then breath work all comes in all of that as well.
Right.
And my
Where can they
website,
find you?
yeah,
How can they reach you,
yeah.
like as a Muslim woman? Because your service is not just limited to being for women in Turkey. You
Hmm.
you reach
Oh,
women from all over the
most
world.
of the
So how
people I
can they get
work
in touch
with
with
are
you?
North America, actually, because
Hmm.
that's where I'm from, and that's most people know me there. So I don't work with that many women here. A
Right.
little bit, actually. I run some healing circles here in Istanbul, but my work is actually mainly online with North America, European women.
Hmm.
And they can go to compassionflow.com is my website.
Hmm.
Although I haven't updated in a while, it's okay. And then my Instagram account is quite active. It's dr.rose.aslan, um,
Hmm.
at symbol. And then also my Facebook, regular Facebook account, they can just follow me there, and I post a lot publicly. I'm
Hmm.
quite active there for people in that 35 and above group. Those over 35 and above, they're like, what's Facebook? And then Facebook, I think I have a page, Compassion Flow Coaching, too, is the name of
Right.
my coaching.
And they'll be able to see all those links on the screen. But thank you so much, Dr. Rose, for really coming on, especially in a time like this when, you know, um, a lot of people, a lot of Muslims especially, do come under target because they have to answer questions that are not necessarily fair.
Mhm.
And for us, just being as a minority in a non-Muslim country can be, as you said, it can be emotionally taxing,
Mhm.
where you just have to be watchful all the time. And
Mhm.
especially now, it's like watchful times a
Mhm.
thousand sort
Mhm.
of situation where you're worried all the time. I think what you have done and what you do now is so incredible, just overall. And it's just shifting from a healing in the public sphere to what you do now is healing in a personal sphere,
Mhm.
so that Muslims can be a before it was so Muslims can be
Mhm.
represented better, and now Muslims can heal better from all that they go through. So I'm so grateful for what you have done and what you do. And I'm grateful to everybody who's listened in and watched us on YouTube. Y'all take care of yourself, and may peace be on you all.
Thank you so much, Shahla.